There are moments in life when a single decision feels less like a choice and more like a quiet surrender to truth. The kind that changes everything without fireworks or noise, and that night was one of those moments for me because loneliness had been sitting beside me for so long that it felt like part of my shadow, following me through the halls of a house that no longer felt like home, a house where I existed but was no longer seen, where Albert, my husband of many years, moved through his days like a stranger, asleep on the couch or locked away in his study. Growing older before my eyes while something inside me slowly faded, and at 54 I felt far older than my years, not in body, but in spirit, worn down by silence, by the absence of touch, by conversations that never happened. And it was that emptiness that finally pushed me to pick up my phone and call Hector. Albert's nephew, young, attentive, alive in a way that reminded me of everything I thought I had lost. And when I told him I was leaving, that I needed him to come take care of his uncle, I wasn't even sure if I meant the words or if I was simply reaching out into the dark, hoping someone, anyone, would hear me. And when he arrived hours later and I saw Albert sleeping peacefully, untouched by my turmoil, something hardened inside me, while Hector's presence filled the room with a quiet intensity that made my hands tremble as I packed my suitcase, torn between anger and doubt. Because a part of me wondered whether I truly wanted to leave or whether I was waiting for someone to stop me. And when Hector stood in the doorway, concern softening his voice as he asked me not to go, telling me that things could still be worked through, I felt the sharp edge of my resolve dull, just a little, not because of Albert, but because Hector really saw me, and when he spoke about how things between us hadn't only been about talking, a silence settled between us that carried everything we had never said out loud, a shared understanding that had been building for far longer than either of us wanted to admit. And in that moment, I realized that the loneliness inside me was shifting, changing shape, becoming something warmer and far more dangerous. And when I decided to stay, unzipping my suitcase and telling Hector that Albert would be gone soon, that I wanted time not to fix a broken marriage, but to open myself to honesty, those 2 days felt endless, filled with pretending, with polite conversations and unspoken tension, watching Albert remain oblivious while Hector carried his own quiet storm. And when Saturday finally came and Albert left once again without ceremony, eager to disappear into his own world, Hector returned later that day changed. Anger burning in his eyes as he told me Albert wouldn't be back for days, and instead of heartbreak, I felt a strange calm because there was nothing left to hope for where my husband was concerned. And that evening, as Hector admitted he could no longer defend a man who had neglected me for so long, I felt a door close behind me, gently but finally, and suggested something simple. Ordinary even, just beers and conversation, because what I needed most was to feel normal again, and as we talked, laughed, shared memories and frustrations. The air between us grew heavier with something unspoken, a closeness that felt natural and inevitable. And when we sat together on the couch, laughter fading into silence, our eyes held each other a moment too long, and I realized that happiness, real happiness, had been missing from my life for years. And Hector admitted that he felt the same, that the only time he truly felt good was when he was with me. The truth of it settled deep in my chest, steady and undeniable, and when I asked him if he was lonely too, if there was anyone else in his life, the honesty in his quiet confession told me everything I needed to know. And in that shared vulnerability, something fragile and powerful took shape. Not driven by impulse alone, but by a long-ignored need to be chosen, to be wanted, to be present. And when he finally admitted that he could no longer hide how he felt, that he knew I wasn't running anymore, the world seemed to narrow to the space between us. The past falling away as his hands found mine, gentle and certain. And when our lips met, it wasn't rushed or reckless, but full of emotion that had been waiting patiently for the right moment. A release that felt less like betrayal and more like awakening, like stepping back into myself after years of absence. And as we held each other, letting the rest of the night blur into quiet closeness and warmth, I understood that whatever lay ahead would be complicated, uncertain, and real, but for the first time in a very long while. I wasn't afraid because the emptiness that had once defined me was finally gone, replaced by the simple, undeniable truth that sometimes beginnings don't announce themselves loudly. They arrive softly in a single night when you finally allow yourself to feel again.